So the Gemara yesterday discussed the halacha of moed b'knas yachach bo'edim, and the Gemara quoted that Rav said that moed b'knas yachach bo'edim is potter, and Shmuel holds moed b'knas yachach bo'edim is chayiv. And Reb Chisda asked the kasha to Rav Huna based on a story that occurred with Rabbi Gamliel. Rabbi Gamliel once by mistake blinded his eye, and he was so excited, blinded the eye of his Eved, that is. And he was so excited because he always wanted to free his Eved because his Eved was an Eved kosher. But he didn't want to be over on Dasei of his Nachalta Moisom of Nechem Acharechem. But now that he blinded his Eved's eye and he's subject to the Knas, that the Eved is Yosy L'Cheres, he was delighted. And when he met Rabbi Yeshua, he told him, my Eved Tevi finally is going free. So Rabbi Yeshua asked him, how is that he's going free? So Rabbi Gamliel told Rabbi Yeshua, because I blinded him by mistake. So Rabbi Yeshua told him, did Adam come yet? No. So if Adam didn't come, then the Eved doesn't go free. Now, what if Adam would have come? If Adam would have come, according to what Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Gamliel seem to be agreeing to, is that the Eved would not go free. So that means moed b'knas v'yachach bo'edim would be chayiv. So how could you hold the Rab that moed b'knas v'yachach bo'edim is potter? So the Gemara answered, because the haidah that Rabbi Gamliel made was not a valid haidah because it wasn't in front of a bezdin. Even though it was to Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Yeshua was the Av Bezdin, that's not called being moed in front of the bezdin, because in fact bezdin was not in session. When court is in session and there's a formal haidah in front of bezdin, that's what moed b'knas is. But you were not moed b'knas, and therefore, if Adam will still come and say edus, then your Eved will go free. But if Eved doesn't come, if Adam don't come to Bezdin and say edus that they saw you knock out the eye of Tevi, then he will not go free. Correct the Gemara. We're right on the top of Daf Ayin Hamad Aleph. The hot Tanya we learned in the Brisa. Amar Loi. Amar Loi. Yeshua told him, Ein bidvarecha klum, your words are nothing, shekvar haidisa, because you were moed. So you see a brisa that says that the fact that he was moed does pater. It's not in front of a formal bus. Zok my lab tonight. It must be a machlekes tonight. Hi Tana, the Omar Shekfar Ein Lach Edim, the Tana that said that the reason why the Eved won't go through because you don't have Edim, Mashma, if Edim would come, you would still have to free your Eved. Savar Moed B'knas V'achach Bo'edim is Chayiv. That Tana holds Moed B'knas V'achach Bo'edim is Chayiv. The Hi Tana, the Omar Shekfar Haidisa, and the Tana that says that since you were Moed already, the Eved will not go free. So maybe the machlokes between Rav and Shmuel is totally the machlokes tonight on how they reported the story. If the story was reported because you were moed, that's why the Eved doesn't go free. That will tell you that moed b'knas v'achach is potter. And if the story was reported because Adam didn't come yet, that will tell us that if Adam came, he would be chayiv, and therefore moed b'knas v'achach bo'edim is chayiv. Zakt the Marloi. It's not a machlokes tonight. The chula alma moed b'knas v'achach bo'edim potter. Everybody would agree to Rava. So what is this machlokes between how the story was reported? Welcome everybody. And this is the machlokes. Hi Tana the Amar. Shekvar Ein Lach Edim. The Tana that says that the reason why the Eved won't go free because Adam didn't come yet. Savar Chutz L'Bezdin have holds that the Haidah is not a good Haidah because just giving a Haidah in front of the Av Bezdin, but not while Bezdin is formally sitting, is not a good Haidah. And therefore, an Adam can still come and be Mechayiv Yidaknas. But the Bride said a closer story that Rabbi Yeshua said it's too late. You could never free your Eved because you were moed already. Sover Bevesin Hava holds that the story happened in Bezdin. That in fact he did go to Bezdin. And when he went to Rabbi Yeshua to tell him all excited that my Eved's going free, he actually walked into Bezdin and told that to Rabbi Yeshua during Bezdin's session. Zog the Heilige Gemara weiter. Itmar. Moide beknas v'acher kach boed. Rav Amar Potter, Shmuel Amar Chayiv, and Shmuel says Chayiv. Amar Rava bar Ahiloi. My time with the Rav. What is this for of Rav? Where did Rav get this from? That Moide beknas yachach boedim is Potter. Zog the Gemara. Because the pasuk says in the parsha of Ganav, it says, "Im himatzei timatzei biyadoi hagneva misharat ad chamorat sechayim shnayim mishalim." If you remember, the Dvei Chizkiah learned from this pasuk the whole makar that a ganav faced kefil. Thank you so much. That's how we know that a ganav faced kefil. But from himatzei to matzei, the Gemara wants to darshan. Im himatzei be'edim, then timatzei b'dayanim. When will Dayanim enforce a class such as Kefel? That's only if it was discovered, this fact, that you violated whatever you did. In this case, it's referring to Geneva, only if that was discovered and bested by Dayanim. Prat lemarshia esatz. But someone who's marshia himself, someone who admits to the chiyuv, for instance, he came to bested and money that he stole, he'll be part from Kefel. Similarly, if an Adam comes and is money to bested, that he knocked out one of the Russia Ivarim of his Eved, he will be put. Correct Gemara, Lo Mali, why do I need this pasuk? Thank you. Lo Mali, why do you need this pasuk? There's another pasuk that tells us exactly the same thing. The pasuk says, Al kol dvar pesha, al shar al chamor al sal salma, al kol asher avedash asher yomer kiyuzeh. This was talking about Toyin Tainis Ganav, Ad Elohim Yavid Vashneim, Asher Yishion Elohim Yishalom Shnaim L'Reyu. So it says Asher Yishion Shaprat L'Marshia Asatzma. So we already know from Asher Yishion. Why do we need two psukim to tell us the same halacha that Moed B'Knas is Potter? Shmamina, it must be Moed B'Knas the Achach Bo'edim is Potter. We have two halachas, two psukim that are telling us Moed B'Knas is Potter. One, if it was Moed B'Knas, even if Edom didn't come, and the Torah repeats the Chiddush to tell us that even if Edom came after you're a Moed, you're still going to be Potter. That is how Rav understands these two psukim. Shmuel Amar Lach, Shmuel says, we can't learn an extra thing from it, as if there's a second time where the Torah teaches us that Moed B'Knas is Potter, because that pasuk we use to teach us b'chlal the halacha that a ganav face kefil. K'detan Dvei Chizkiah, like Chizkiah taught us a couple of lot ago when we were discussing the sugya of Toyin Tainis Ganav. And if you remember, there were two psukim by Toyin Tainis Ganav, and there was a machlokes if they both apply to Toyin Tainis Ganav and Ganav Yidon Fami Matzeh to Matzeh, or if one of the two psukim was referring to Ganav Atzmai. So Eisei Rav Shmuel. Rav is going to ask a kasha to Shmuel. Rav is going to prove that Moed B'Knas the Achar Kach Bo Edim is Potter. And this is the brayso. Ro Edim Shemamash Moshem Uboyim. A Ganav sees that there are Edim who are coming to report that he stole, and he wants to avoid the Knossos. And therefore he ran to Bezdin, and he was Moed in Bezdin V'Amar Ganavti. I stole, which means now he's going to have to pay Karen, but he's going to be Potter from Kefel, and therefore he wouldn't be able to be mechuyev dal v'hei either. Avaloi tavachti v'loi macharti, but I didn't do tvichol mechir. And then Edim come, even if they say Eidos that he was tavei chamachar, he still does not pay dal v'hei. Einim shalom ela keren, all he will pay is keren. Why will he pay only keren? Because Kevel he doesn't pay because he was moed b'knas. And Kefel and Dal Vei doesn't pay because once you didn't pay Kefel is one of the components of Daled V'Hei. So since you cannot pay Kefel, he doesn't pay Daled V'Hei either. So you have a right that Moide B'Knas, V'Yachach Bo'edim is Potter. Because here he only came to be Moide because he saw Edom coming. So obviously, as soon as he was Moide, they came. But they came too late. So you have a Raya Moide B'Knas, V'Yachach Bo'edim is Potter. Amalei Shmuel said no. Who said Edom came? Hacha b'mayas kinon kigoin shechazru Edom lachareya. The Edom never came. Yeah, he saw them coming, and he ran to be Moide, but it was a false alarm. They didn't come at them. But if they actually came, he would be chayiv. Frag the Gemara b'ami detani seifa. They wanted to say this on Tzvicha Mechira. I don't know. That's a good point. But frag the Gemara, it's impossible to learn that the Edom didn't come. Because look at the second half of this very brisa, where we have a dissenting opinion. B'ami detani seifa Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon Omer. Yavayu Edom v'ya'idu. Let the Edom come and say Eidos, meaning, and then he's going to be chayiv michlal. The Tanakam Mesavar, loy. That in fact, the Tanakama holds that even if they come, it won't help. So you have a raya that Moide B'Knas Yachakach Bo Edom is Potter. Amalei Shmuel. So Shmuel said, you're right. The Tanakama holds that Moide B'Knas Yachach Bo Edom is Potter. And Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon holds Yavayu v'Yidu and Moide B'Knas Yachach Bo Edom is Chayiv. So Shmuel said, yes, you're right. I'm not consistent with the Tanakama, but Lav Ika Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon the Koikavasi. Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says that once the Eidos come, they will be Mechayiv me. Another Amri Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. Shmuel is going to tell us that my shita of Moed B'Knas v'Yachach Bo'edim is Chayiv is consistent with the Tana of Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, but it's not consistent with the Tana Kam. Zakamar l'Shmuel v'Adai Tanai. Shmuel is clearly admitting that his halacha of Moed B'Knas v'Yachach Bo'edim is Chayiv is not going to stem according to the Tana Kama. It will only be consistent with Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. But how about l'Rav? L'Rav mi lema Tanai. The fact that Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon says does that contradict Rav? Or maybe Rav could explain the sheet of Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon why it's different than the standard case of Moed B'Knas Yachakach Bo Edom, and maybe even Rav would hold that it would be chayiv in that instant. Zok Gemara Amalach Rav. Rav can tell us. Another Amri Afilu the Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon. I can make an argument that Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon would be moeded to me that the Moed B'Knas v'Yachakach Bo Edom is Potter. So why did Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar say Yavayu Edom v'Ya'idu and to be mechayiv them? Zok Gemara At Kan Loika Amar Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon Hasam Elam Mishum the Kamoidi Machmas Biasusa the Edom. The price that clearly tells us that this guy didn't come and be moed voluntarily. He saw Edom coming. Since he saw Edom coming, that prompted him to be moed. So he wasn't moed because he wanted to come clean. He was moed because he wanted to avoid paying kefil. There, in fact, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar holds you right, chayiv. But what in the case where you were moed out of the goodness of your heart? If you're moed by yourself, and you were not being moed because you saw Edom coming, afilu Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon moed, even Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon would be moed that moed b'knas yachakach bo Edom is put. So in the case of Tevi, for instance, where Rabbi Gamliel was moed not because he wanted to get out of it, he was moed l'shem shamayim. There, of course, Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon would be moed that moed b'knas yachach bo Edom will be put. Amar Rav Hamnuna. So Rav Hamnuna comes up with a bombshell chiddush. It depends on what he's accomplishing when he's being moed. Mistavra Milsa de Rav. It's Mistavra that even Rav, who says moed b'knas v'yachach bo Edom is potter, is only be'omer ganafti. If he said ganafti, because when he said ganafti, he wants to part himself from kevel. Could be, but he is being mechayiv himself b'keren. So it's costing him money. to say Ganafti. And then Ubo Eidim Shaganav Potter. Why?
Not really. He never had it.
I'm sorry?
Not really costing him because he never had it.
Well, he did have it. He stole
He
it.
had it.
He stole, but it wasn't this. But he's now forced to give back what he stole. Because in his Haidah, he's actually going to have to pay something back. But what if he said, I didn't steal? He denied that he stole. Ubo Edim Shaganav. And Edim came and said that he stole. And then he didn't want to pay Dal V'Ei. So he quickly said, but I was Teveach. Because of Vama Tavachti Macharti. And then Ubo Edim Shetavach Umachar Chayiv. You know why? Because his Haidah of Tavachti or of Macharti was only to pater himself. Because it didn't cost him anything to admit that he was Teveach. Sharai Potter Atzmai Miklu. So this is a very big chiddush. It limits dramatically the scope of Rav's halacha. Moed v'knas is only potter if Edim come, if your haidah costed you something. It shows you're sincere, you're sacrificing. But if your haidah doesn't cost you anything anyway, because once you're moed, you're not chayiv at all, well then it's not a good haidah. Now this poses a problem for us. Because we said earlier that Rav holds that in the case of Gamaliel being Moida, that he knocked out the eye of his Eved, that's called the Moida Knas, and Acharach Boedim would be Potter. The problem is, even Rav is Moida that that's not a good Haidah, because the Haidah doesn't cost him anything, right? By being Moida, he knocked out the eye of his Eved. If Moida Knas is Potter, he won't have to pay anything. It's not like he was money that he stole where he has to pay. So what Rabbi Hamnuna just said is contradictory to what we said earlier, to what Rav Huna and Rav Chisda, who were discussing this halacha of Moed v'knas v'ach bo'edim, and they wanted to bring a raya from the story of Rabbi Gamaliel and the eye of Tevi. According to Rav Hamnuna, that's not relevant, because that's not a case where Rav holds his potter. So Amar Rava said, Kapachti lesabe devei Rav. You, Rav Hamnuna, are making angry the Sabbath devei Rav, referring to Rav Huna, because what you're saying is inconsistent with what they said. The Rabbi Gamaliel pointed out Rabbi Gamaliel, in fact, potter himself from everything. Because Amar le Rav Chisda le Rav Huna, and Rav Chisda asked a kasha from Rav Huna from this very case, where Rabbi Gamaliel was moida to a knas that he was pattered in Johnson due to his haidah. And you don't find that Rabbi Huna didn't respond to him. So what do you bring me a raya from there? There, would be chayiv because that haidah wasn't a good haidah. Now you can see there's a long toisus that takes up the whole omen. There's a question of who Sabe Devei Rav are. So according to the way we just learned, Sabe Devei Rav is going to be Rav Huna. But Tosfos brings down from different Gemaras a raya that Sabe Devei Rav might be Rav Hamnuna. And then what Rava meant to say was, Amar Rava Kafachti Sabe Devei Rav. If anything, this is a kasha on Rav Hamnuna. So Rav is responding back to Rav Hamnuna. It's shver on you. But Rashi learns Kafachti Sabe Devei Rav means over here. Rashi learns that it means you're making Rav Huna upset. So we have a little bit of a problem because the Gemara doesn't answer this. In fact, the Gemara brings a raya to Rav Hamnuna. Itmar nami Amar Abchi bar Abba Amar Rabbi Yochanan ganafti. If someone is muddy that he stole, uboidim shaganav, he'll be potter. Why? Sharei chayiv atzmai b'keren, which is exactly what Rav Hamnuna said. Aval Amar loy ganafti uboidim shaganav. Because his haidah was not a valid haidah. So this reinforces this is a supporter of Hamnuna. So if that's the case, we do have to understand. So what's pshat in the discussion of Rav Huna and Rav Chisda? L'chayr, there shouldn't be any raya from the case of Rabbi Gamaliel, because his haidah was not a valid haidah, because it wasn't pottering from anything. So there's a lot of raid about this in the Rishonim.
How long after can the witnesses come?
I want it forever. I don't know if there's an expiry date. So I saw somewhere that there's a very big difference. The case where Rav Hamnuna says that it's not a good idea is if you first said loy ganafti. If you said loy ganafti, by definition, you also said loy tavachti v'loy macharti, right? You made a denial. Once you're caught with the gneva, you come and try to fix the tficha. That's not a good idea. But in the case of Rabbi Gamaliel, where he never denied anything, he right away came and admitted that he knocked out the eye of Tevi. That would be a good idea. So maybe Rav Hamnuna's case is only if you first deny the gneva, and that shows that you're just looking to get away from it. Amar Rabashi, Masnisin ubraisa nami deka. I have a Mishnah that supports this halacha, and I have a brisa that supports this halacha. Zok the heilige Gemara. Let's start with Masnisin. Detnan. Ganav al pishnayim v'tabach u'machar al piedach. Once again, our Mishnah. One was Ganav al pishnayim v'tabach u'machar al piedachad oy al pi'atzmai. The halacha is Misham Tashlum Kefel, the Einim Misham Tashlum Abba Chamish. Frag the Gemara, if the Chiddush of the Brisa is Moed B'Knas Potter, so why did the Brisa only discuss where you were Moed for on the Tficha? Why doesn't it discuss a case where you were Moed on the Gneva? Right? It says Ganav al Pishnayim. It only discusses the Haidah on the Tvicha, but it doesn't discuss Haidah on the Gneva. So, Freit the Gemara, Lamali the Tani Ganav al Pishnayim. Why don't we give an example of Moed B'Knas by the Gneva as well? Listen to Ganav, v'tabach al Pi'erechad, ay al Pi'atzmai, einim Mishalm el Keren. Right? Ella, you know what the Mishnah must be telling us? A very important thing. Turning on top of base. It must be telling me, Elalav Hokamash Mulon, Gonav al Pi Shnayim, V'Tavach al Pi Erechad, Ay al Pi Atzmai. Dafka, where he was not moide to the Geneva, he was only moide to the Tfichel Mechira. That's when, as the Bach says, the Loy Mechayev Atzmai Bekerenhu. He is not being Mechayev himself in Keren when he's only being moide to the Daldvei. Who the Amrinon al Pi'atzmai Dumid al Pi'erechad. If you remember earlier in the Gemara, we said the fact that al Pi'atzmai is lumped together with al Pi'erechad, it's to tell us a chiddush. That is, Ma Pi'erechad, Ki Osi Eirechad Mitztar Fadei Mechayiv. Just like by an Eirechad, if at a later time a second aid comes that could join forces with the first aid, you will be Mechayiv from Dalad. Therefore, al piatzmai nami, so too, if you are moide by yourself, kiyasu edim mechayiv. If edim comes, you'll still be chayiv. Why will you still be chayiv? Because moide b'knas v'achach moedim is chayiv when your haidah was not a haidah that was being mechayiv yourself with anything. Avogana v'tavach u'machar al pi'erechad al piatzmai the chayiv atzmai b'keren. But if you were moide even on the Geneva, which is a very strong haidah, because in being moide, you're now actually being mechayiv yourself with the Karen. There we don't say lo yamrinin al piatzmai dumid al pi'erechad. Why? Because then even if Adam came later, you would be potter. So that's the Mishnah that supports this distinction that Rav Hamnuna made. That even according to Rav moide b'knas v'achach moedim is potter. That's only if your haidah was mechayiv you with something. But if your haidah was not mechayiv you with anything, then if Adam come later, you will be mechuyev the knas. Brisa, where do we have a brisa that supports this halacha? No, the Tanya the brisa told us. Ra Adam shememash mishinu boyin. If you see Adam that are coming, v'yamar ganafti, and the ganav was moeded that he stole avaloi tavakti avaloi macharti, but he was not moeded to the tvichu mechira. Einim mishalem ela keren. He'll only pay Karen. So the shaila is Lomali Lamisni V'amar ganafti avoloi tavachti v'loi macharti. Why don't we say it was moed on everything? Nisni ganafti oy tavachti macharti, or ganafti v'tavachti oy macharti. Let him say he was moed on both, or let him say that he didn't steal it, but he only moed on tzvicha mechir. L'okamash v'lon time the amar ganafti. Davka, since he said ganafti and he was moed to something that he would have to pay the keren, the chayav atzmei b'keren, they're potter, there he'll be potter from everything. Alamar loy ganafti, and bo edim sheganav. But if he denied the geneva and then he tried to be moeder to save himself from the tvichu mechira, the chazav amar tavachti macharti, ubo edim shetavach machar, where his haidah of tavachti was not machayev him with anything at all, the loy chayav atzmei b'keren, there chayiv. There he would be chayiv if Edom came later. Al ma'idad tficha la faydai. So you have two rayas. You have a Mishnah and a Brisa that both support the making a distinction in your haidah. If it's costing you anything, there even if Edom came later, you'll be potter. Versus if the haidah costed you nothing, then you will be chayiv if Edom come later. And we made a distinction as well. Even if it's not costing you anything, that wouldn't disqualify your haidah. But in this case with Ganafti, he originally denied that he even was Tavei Chamoicher. That's one shot. The other shot is he sees Edom coming. He knows Edom are coming. So he knows Edom are going to come and will eventually say Tavachti Macharti. The same way they caught him on the stealing, they probably caught him on the Tficha Mechira. So he's only being moided to try to get out of it, and it's not costing him anything. That's not a good idea. And if Edom come later, even Rav would be moided Bechnas, V'achar Bo Edom would be Chai. Zok to Gemara, from the last price, you don't necessarily have a right. Loy, because maybe that's not the chiddush that the Bryce is telling us. Maybe the Bryce Dafka wants to find the case that when you're potter from the Geneva, automatically, if you're potter from Kefel, automatically you're potter from Dal Bay. Maybe that's the whole chiddush of this Bryce. Maybe he guva kamash v'lon. Kivin Amar Ganafti, Vibalti was more done the Geneva. Even though he denied the Tvicha Mechira and the Edom came for the Tvicha Mechira, Avagav Damar Loy Tavachti V'Loy Mecharti. But Ubo Edom Shetavach Machar, Potter will still be Potter. Why should he be Potter from Dal V'Hei? He denied it. And Edom said he was Tavach Mecher. So the teretz is, this is the Chiddush itself of the Brisa. My timer, Tashlume Abba Chamisha Merachmana, V'Loy Tashlume Gimel V'Dalet. V'Loy Tashlume Abba, V'Loy Tashlume Shloisha. And Belt Kefel is an integral component of the Dalad Vei, and he's part of them Kevel because he was murdered on the Gneva. Therefore, for a technicality, he can't pay Dalad Vei, and that's the Chiddush of the Brisa. But Lav Dako, should you read into it so deep to learn that a Haidah, the Tzvicha alone, is not a good Haidah. Okay, Gewalt. Leima Ketanoi. Let's suggest once again that we have a Machloikas Tanoim, Lagabi de Alacha of Moide Beknas, Vachach Bo Edim, in a case where the Haidah is not being mechayiv from anything. So the Gemara is giving a lot of attention to this chiddush of Rav Hamnuna, that a Haidah is not a good Haidah to pater you, according to Rav, even if Edom come later, if the Haidah didn't cost you anything. Hayu shnayim Edom shuganav. Two Edom came along and said Eidos, in fact, that he stole. Hayu shnayim Edom Yosy shetavach machar. And there were other Edom that said Eidos that he did Tfichu Mechir. So the halach is Huzmu Eide Gedeva. If the Eide Gedeva were Huzam, that topples down the entire castle, and of course he can't be chayav for Dalad V'Hei if he didn't steal it. And therefore Eidus Shabbatla Mektsasa Batlakul. But what would happen if it's Huzmu Eide Tficha? So then what would happen is he is still Mechuyev to pay Karen and Kefel because he was still found to have stolen. The Tvichu Mechira he might not have been found to have done. So the halacha is Hu Meshalem Tashlume Kefel. He still has to pay Kefel because he stole it, and there were Edom that testified that he stole it. But the Dalad V'Hei, the extra 3 or 4 payments, which they're mechayiv him falsely because they're Huzam, now the false Edom, the Edom that were Huzam, has to pay that to the Ganim. Ve'en Meshalem and Tashlume Shloisha, they have to pay him Tashlume Shloisha, which means the Ganim made money on the deal, right?
Not in the first case where the first set of witnesses. So what happens? Obviously, the second witnesses were lying too.
Correct, but they were in Huzam. So they're Hukash, and therefore nothing happened to them. I mean, what happened to them is could be they get Malchus for saying false edus, and could be we won't trust for edus anymore, but they don't have to be, they're not saddled with the Kasher Zon. Now, Sumchas is going to make a comment, a dissenting opinion, that's not going to make any sense at all. And since it won't make any sense at all, the Gemara is going to be forced to say that the Rabbanon must have said a third statement, and that is what Sumchas is commenting on. Because it's impossible to understand that Sumchas is commenting on one of the two cases that we just learned right now. And this is what Sumchas said. Sumchas Amru, Hein Mishalmin Tashlume Kefel, the Eidim have to pay the Kefel, for whom Mishalm Tashlume Gimel, Lapar, Ushnaim Lyle. And these got to pay the down day. Now that makes no sense at all based on the first two cases that we just said. Ahaya, on what case was Sumchas referring to? Ahaya Koi Sumchas. In what case is Sumchas referring to? Ilema Reisha. So the Reisha is when the Eidei Geneva were Huzam. So it topples down the whole theory, and then what would happen? They would have to pay kefel to the Ganiv, and nobody pays Dalpay. And now Sumchas is coming along to say that they pay kefel to the Bailam, and he pays Dalpay. How could that be? Leslie the Sumchas Edu Shabbat L'Mektsasa Batla Kula. Avad Sumchas must hold that the Edit Ficha are no longer valid if we don't even have Edim that he stole it. So Sumchas is definitely not commenting on that case. Bela Seifa. So let's say he's going on the Seifa. What was the case? The case was where the Eidei Dalad V'Hei were Huzam, but the Eidei Geneva were not Huzam. What did the Tanakhama say? The Gan still has to pay Kefel, but the Eidim on the Tvicho Mechir that were Huzam have to pay 3 or 4 to the Gan. So Frag to Gemara. So what is Rav Huna going to say there? Bela Seifa. Shabir Kami Rabbanon. The Rabbanon's psak is very, very just. Who Masham to Shlume Kefel, because there are still Edom intact that say that he stole. They Masham to Shlume Shloisha. How could Sumchas say for carrot that they pay Kefel? Why should they pay Kefel? Ella, it must be Milsa Achriti Ikabanayim. There must have been a third comment, a third halacha that the Tanakhama taught us, that's for some reason not quoted in the Brisa, and it's that halacha that Sumchas is arguing on. And what must be the case? Our case exactly. Could go into Asu Beitrei. Two of them came and said, Amr Le, they told him, Ganafta, you stole. Amr Lu, he told him, you know what, you are right. Ganafti, I did steal. I'm being moed to you, I did steal. So Adam came and he didn't deny it. But he told Adam, not only did I steal, now that you caught me, but Tavachti you macharti. I was Tavechem. Now, clearly, this is a guy who's only being murdered on the tficha because it's not costing him anything. He wasn't murdered on the gneva. Exactly our discussion. But there's one twist. Miyu tells the Adam, you're lying. Yes, I did steal, but you guys are lying because you didn't see me steal. Miyu loy b'fnechem ganafti. I never stole in front of you. And you know what? I'm going to bring Adam that places you somewhere else at the date and time where you're claiming that I stole. So just because the facts are right, you are Adam Zoimim. For Aishi Sahadi Vaziminu, the Loi Ba'apayu Ganav. The Ganav brought Adam to show that these two Adam who said that he stole, even though he did steal, but they didn't see it. And then the Aishi Balabayis Sahadi, the Balabayis brought Adam, Vasidu Be'ed Ganav. And the Adam of the Baal were emes Adam, and they said Adis that he stole, and they also said Adis that v'tavachu macher. And the question is, the Haidah of Geneva for sure is not a good Haidah. The question is the Haidah of Tvicha a good Haidah? Uvaidah Tvicha kamefali. And the argument is mamish ar shayla the Haidah of the Tvicha. Let me just finish this statement. The Rabban and Savri, the Rabban holds Afal Gab the Haidah Geneva. Machmas Edimu the Kamoida, even though the Haidah of the Geneva is only because of Adam, and therefore his Haidah is not a good Haidah, because he's clearly only being made because of Adam yes, they were proven to be false, but Lamaisa they were Edom. That's why he's paying the kefil. But Haidah the Tficha, Haidah, the Haidah on the Tficha is the good Haidah, and therefore he's potter on the Dal Vahei, even though Edom came along later and said that he shechted. Who potter? But for some Chasavar, even the Haidah, the Geneva, Machmas Edom, since he only was admitting to the Geneva because they were Edom, yes, they were false, but they were Edom, and he probably knew that there were other Edom as well, the Kamoida. So therefore, even the Geneva, Machmas Edom, the Kamoida, the Tficha, Lav Haidah, the Tficha, the Haidah and the Tficha is not a good Haidah either. And therefore, V'hanach Edom Kamayu Dasminu, the first set of Edom that said that he was Ganav, that were Huzam, they pay Mishalm and Tashlume Kefil. They have to pay the Kefil. So they'll pay it to him and then he'll pay it to the Bailam. But he's not out of pocket for the Tashlume Kefil. But for whom Mishalm, Shloish Lapar, Shnaim La'ayel, because his Haidah of Tficha was not a good Haidah. So that's exactly this discussion. If you make a Haidah only due to the fact that there's Edom coming, and the Haidah is costing you nothing at all, is that a good Haidah? According to Sumchus, it's not a good Haidah, which supports Rav Hamnuna, and according to the Tanakama, it is a good Haidah.
How does he know that he's Odai? How does he know that the
Well, when he's told, he may have noticed that there were Edom watching. And he only came because he wouldn't have mentioned it on his own. He only mentioned it because false Edom came.
what's the Rebbe about
I'm sorry?
Isn't that a separate machlokes?
What do you say? So that is the question. That Rav says, Moed b'knas v'achakach bo Edom is potter. Is that only if he made a Haidah that costs him money? Or is it even if he made a Haidah on a Tfichel Mechira that would not cost him money? That is exactly what the Shaila is. And that's what Rav Hamnuna said, that even Rav is Moed, if he made a Haidah that was not costing him anything, like Tabach u'Mochar, there, if Edom come, he would be Chai. So Zok to Gemara, I don't like this pshat. Amar Vacha B'Rei Ravika Eloi. Who said that this is pshat? You fabricated a case that happens to be this discussion of a Haidah that's not costing you anything. That's true, but you can't bring a riot from a fabricated case if I can offer an alternative shot in what happened over here.
It's also fabricated.
That's right. But if you could fabricate, you can't bring a riot based on your fabrication, because who said your fabrication is right? Maybe my fabrication is right. So maybe everybody would agree to Rav Hamnuna that the Haidah of Tficha, when it's not costing him anything, is not a valid Haidah. And Rashi makes it very clear, it is a valid Haidah if no Edom come. He won't be Dal Vei. But it's not a valid Haidah to pater him from paying if Edom end up coming. Zog to Gemara, Ella, you know what the discussion here is? If the Eidos of the Geneva are good Eidos in the first place. The second set of Eidim that the Baal brought, that said that he was Gonav, right? And he was Tavach u'Mocher. Are they valid Eidim or not? Maybe they're not valid Eidim. And maybe that's the machlokes. If they're valid Eidim, then the Ganav would have to pay Geneva. If they're not valid Eidim, then they wouldn't have to pay Geneva. Why should they not be valid Eidim? Because these are Eidim that you cannot possibly be Mazin, and the Eidim that are insulated, that are protected from being Muzam, they're possible Eidim. Eidim are only good Eidim if they're vulnerable. If they're not vulnerable, then they can say anything. There's no risk on their part. So why are these Eidim Shet Yochel Azima? Because of the following case. Very similar to what we said before with one twist. Because going to Ozer Sahadi, the Amar Leika Nafta, false Edom came and said, you stole. And therefore he was right away Moida, and he said, Ganafti, Vitavachti, Umacharti. However, so far it's exactly like the earlier case, and here's where there's a twist. Last time he just said, Ganafti, but he didn't say anybody else knew. Here he actually knew who the Edom were that the Baalim were going to bring, and he knows that they're coming. Ella b'fnei ploini uploini. You know who did see me steal and made a tvicha mechira? Those two Edom, Reuben and Shimon. And then the then the Ganav brought Adam to be Mazim, the Adam that said testimony against him. And then the Asu Pliny, and then the actual Adam who he identified as the valid Adam, they came, Basidu Bey, the Ganav Tabuchumah. And the question has nothing to do with Haidah. Everybody holds Haidah wouldn't be a good Haidah. Here the question is of Hakam Ibli. The Rabbanan Savri, the Rabbanan hold, Havila Edu Shiat Yochel Azim. Since he himself was Moida, that these are valid Adam, now there's Zimun, not there's Zimun, there's Zoymain proof. If there's Zoymain proof, they don't have validity anymore. And therefore, it's as if there's no Adam on the Geneva, and there's no Adam on the Tfichu Mechira. So let's see what Rashi says. Why if it's Eidu Shiyat Chazima, why is it that Sumchus would hold that the Adam pay the kefil and he pays the tzvichim? How does that work? So Dr. Rashi as follows.
Defendant knew that. He can also say that so that he'd get out of it.
I'm sorry?
Defendant knew this halacha according to Rabbanan.
Right.
He would say that to get out of it as well.
I hear. But it works. Loi, the Fula Alma, Haida de Ficha, but Loi Haida de Geneva, Lav Klumhi, Lepoitroi, but Makamedim Kabir. Everybody agrees with Kabir. The Ihani Sahadi Basroi Sadusam Al Yusahava, if the second set of Adam were kosher Adam, Loi Have a Patra Le Rabbanon, everybody would agree he has to pay Dalvei. What type of Adam are we talking about? Adam that are Zoymein proof. How are they Zoymein proof? The final Adam, who actually were legit Adam that the Baal ended up bringing, it's Al Pi Haganav Hevia. The Ganav told the Bailam, these are the Adam that saw it. Shomar Ganav Bezdin, the Ganav said in Bezdin, Bifnei Ploini u Ploini Ganafti. When he was murdered, he says, I stole, and Reuben and Shimon saw me. So the Adam that came were Zeman proof because they were supported by the Haidah of the Ganav himself. Rabbanan Patri le Ganav me'arba v'chamisha. The Rabbanan would patri the Ganav from arba v'chamisha. You know why? Because they're possible Adam. The Adam is a tabak to the heart. Now all the Ganav would have to pay is Karen to the Bailam, because that he has to pay. He stole it. The Kevel he can go take from the Adam who were being mechayiv him something wrongfully. He doesn't pay any knas. Why doesn't he pay knas? My timer, Tahani Sadi Basroi, ain't an Adam. The second set of Adam, according to the Tanakama, are bottle. They cannot be believed. We don't have Adam for the Tficha Mechira. Why? The Einach Yochel Azima.
Not only to get out of it, but to make money.
Could be. The Einach Yochel Azima. You cannot be Mazim them. Ulakayim Beit Zu Dinazama. You know why not? Sorry, who hided Tchila before they came? The Ganav was already Moide Shebifneim Ganav, and the Alpiv Bolahai. They only came because he announced them. Right? Once he told the Baal, these are the people who saw, so the Baal went to get those people to come to Bez. So he literally incriminated himself. And therefore, Valav Edis, it's an invalid Edis. Hilchach, Amai Mechayiv. Why are you being Mechayiv him for anything at all? It's only a Haidai's Piv. We only have his testimony that's Mechayiv him with anything. Al Piatzmoy Lo Yishalom Knas. Because of his Haidah, all he has to pay is the Karen. All he's got to pay is the Karen. And the Kefil will have to be kicked in by the Adam Zayrin. The whole mill Sakai Sumchus, and on this point, Sumchus takes a stand, a dissenting opinion. Even though you can't be Mazam Edis, there's still a good Edis. And therefore, the Adam Hamuzamin, the Mishalman, Tashlume Kefil Abailam, the Makam Ganav, they will pay in his stead because they were false Adam, and they try to falsely accuse him of stealing. But the Adam, the second set of Adam that came are good Adam. Why? The Ha'asu Sahade, the Tavachamacher, kosher Adam came and said that God never Tavachamacher. So therefore Sumchas argues in the whole part. Frank the Gemara, how could Sumchas argue on this? Zog to Gemara, but came along, we know the Edus Shiat Yachal Azima is Loyav Edus. Zog to Gemara, what's the whole svara of why Edus Shiat Yachal Azima is Loyav Edus? Because we can't trust them because they know they can get away with it, right? But it depends. Here they also know they can get away with it. But here, they're rock solid, believable, because the God himself was saying they saw it. So where is there a case of Edus Yet Yachal Azima where we're choshish they're lying? They came along and said the God stole, and we don't know exactly what day it was. We don't know exactly what time it was. So they're being evasive. They're being unclear to protect themselves for Azama. There we don't trust them. They're puzzled. The lekala Edus Klau. There we don't recognize the Edus. Avalhacha, you know why they can't be muzam here? Is to you to come because they're rock solid. Because even the Ganav is moida that they saw. That's not the type of Edus Shiat Yachal Azima that we disqualify. Gewaltig. Amar Mar hein mishalman tashlum kevel mit the kamoida the Ganav.
They don't know the details, then it's not Edus at all.
What? We saw him steal. We don't know exactly what day, but we saw him steal. We saw him be Mechal Shabbos. We just don't know what day it was. Now there it wouldn't work.
That's what I'm saying. So it's not really
No, but no, I saw he stole. Zog to Gemara, be the Kamoida, the Ganav, Karen Boishlum. I don't understand. Why do they have to pay kefel? He for sure has to give the Karen. He stole. He was Moida. You're right. Tani Tashlum the kefel. They don't have to pay. The Edom Zayman don't pay both. They just pay the second payment that they were Machayev him wrongfully. But the actual Geneva Avada he has to give back. Okay, we'll stop here. The Geshmak Gemara, because we learned a new twist. Moed v'knara, all moed v'knas are created equal. It's only if you're taka ernst. If you're taka ernst, you'll be potter. But if you're not ernst, you're just saying to get out of something and it's not causing anything. That's not a good idea. Now it is a good idea, but if the Edom came later, you'd still be chayiv. Okay, we'll stop here.